Welcome to Author's Blog Supplemental 4.5 World Building. So when we did the editing for our last video and watched it, we realized we didn't really talk much about my world, which is kind of half the point, is to go through it with you and show you everything. So I'm going to do that today. Mine is contemporary fantasy / urban fantasy, so it uses our world as the basis and then builds out from there, adding whatever fantastical elements I want. And as with most of them, I went with mythology because it is an ever-plumbable wellspring of ideas and interesting things. I thought about doing possibly one of the more obscure kinds of mythological basings, like we don't really see a lot of African or Eastern mythology. We mostly see the Greek mythology, some Norse. Celtic is very big, but when I looked into going that route, I realized that Norse is really the one I wanted to use because it has this lovely list of worlds that I finally pinned down. This actually took a fair amount of research because even in the written Norse mythology, there's several different things that are very different in it from one writing to another writing. Even going back to the sources, you have some discrepancies between what one author says the different worlds are and another author says. So I just, at a certain point, you just have to go, this is how it works in my world. This is something that I felt I needed to know early on, so I have a mental idea of what my world, what my universe that this story takes place in looks like. I also did a more complicated diagram, let me get that a little closer so you can actually see it, of all the different worlds and how they connect to each other and who lives on what, and the order in which they were discovered by the Asgard, which I haven't come up with a better name for them, so they're just Asgard right now, but they're the gods, and how they all interact and which one was found first and how they're all connected. All these lines, that's all the Bifrost connections that bind all the worlds together or connect them so that people can get from one to the other through the gate system. So I did that. I also have a little booklet labeled Worlds, and I keep more detailed write-ups on them, so that gives me that page and the next page for notes in future. So I have just a very quick write-up because I don't really need to get into it in this book. I need to get into it in later books, but this gives me a basis so that I understand what I was basing the first book off of and how I will change it throughout the rest of the book or add to it. So I've got just a little bit, just what I feel I needed. So I did that. This is my journal of crap for my book, along with, I have this notebook thingy, which I can add pages to. I don't have most of it filled up, just a few in the front. And another notebook, and my last one, back before I was calling it Cat Called, it was Kitty Story. So I've actually written and done a lot of research. The first book only touches a little bit on this stuff, so I didn't really get into it in this one. Most of my research was done on, I couldn't say research, but the world building is done on how the Fae courts work. Am I going to go matriarchal or not? How am I going to make that work? What are their desires as a race? How do their powers work? What are the limitations of their powers? Why do they never lie? Just all those little things. Going through and getting a list. This is one of the other things I did with that giant stack of books that I showed you earlier, is I go through and I've written down all the different mythical creatures and what their current origination are, like where I got them from, because these are all the ones I actually want to use at some point or have in my world. I've got more. I do have Native American. I got the Thunderbird. I got some South American stuff, which is really cool. Names of gods from other cultures that we don't know much about because they're in there. Going through, I have to decide which world they come from. Are they Fae? Are they from the Elven world? Are they from the Dwarven world? Are they from the world of elementals? How about the giants? You know, which thing come from what? And you can see that a little bit through here, that I've actually written that down. Shades and Asgard, human shifters are our world. Dwarves, gnomes, and brownies. Instead of brownies being part of the Fae, they're actually part of the Dwarven world for me. The elves, you know, all that stuff. And that gives me a way to pull details into my world when I'm building it to know, oh, this one comes from this court or this world, so they would act this way, or have this color scheme, or have whatever powers, because each world has its own set of powers and they all work a little bit differently. I just yammered for so long. I am so sorry, guys. This is going to be the most boring video you've ever watched in your entire life. Start with the idea of what kind of world do I want? My inspirations, or the urban fantasy I like to read the most, would be Dresden Files, Mercedes Thompson series by Patricia Briggs, Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, and Karen Monning's Fae Fever series was really interesting and a fun take on the Fae. Those are probably my three favorite. So I took drew most of my inspiration actually from how Butcher and Briggs do their stuff, but of course I'm changing it because that's what you do. But I like, particularly what I like in the Dresden Files is how, and Jim Butcher does this with a lot of his books, is each book the world gets a little bit bigger and more complicated, and a little bit bigger and a little more complicated, and I like that aspect of it. Patricia Briggs' series doesn't in the same way. It feels a little bit different. But I also like how her Fae interact, and how she handled that I thought was very interesting. I like how she deals with wolves. But in my world there's a difference. There's human wolf shifters and then there are werewolves, and they're two separate things. So I basically had to build a world that could incorporate all of those things, all of the elements that I really like, which is why instead of having just a single world that everybody lives on and everybody interacts on, I'm doing multiple worlds that different creatures come from. It's honestly probably a lot more complicated, but that's how I did that. That's what I wanted to do. And really from there, I just let myself do research and then get ideas. World building, for me, I don't have a set way of doing it specifically. I kind of pants it. I decide kind of what I want to do and then do a bunch of research and wait for ideas to hit me and then see where I can fit them. And then change that to something else when I read a new piece of information. And then I'll read Greek mythology and realize, ooh, I like this concept, I'm going to have to put that in there, but it doesn't work with this, so I'll just shift it a little bit. It's kind of like doing figuring out a Rubik's Cube. You've got all these ideas and pieces, and you have to keep playing with it until you figure out how to put them all together so that they make a cohesive whole. So if you have any questions or comments, comment down below. Also, if you have any other questions or longer-winded ones that you don't feel like putting up on our comment section, then by all means just email us at hey@getwriting.com. I can't believe I just said that. It's .wang. How do I forget .wang? hey@getwriting.wang. We'll see you next week.